to introduce to this audience our keynote speaker, the Honorable Patrick J. Murphy, Acting Secretary of the Army. Mr. Murphy, as you know, was a two-time member of Congress, and I'm sure most of you know that he was the first Vietnam veteran elected to, not Vietnam, geez, brain. I got it on my brain here. Iraq War veteran to be elected to Congress. Passed a number of important pieces of legislation, earned the Bronze Star, and he is now acting as our Secretary of the Army and representing civilian oversight of the United States Army, and it's a great honor for me to introduce to you the Honorable Patrick J. Murphy, American soldier, patriot, and our guest speaker. And an Irishman, by the way.
Hey, thanks, sir. General Sullivan, thank you so much. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm not going to try and stand behind that too much. Let me tell you something. General Sullivan is a great American, which we all know. Let me start by just saying Happy St. Patrick's Day. There's a reason why I wore this tie. I want to thank you also for coming here to celebrate my feast day here in Huntsville. General Sullivan and I were at the NBC seats last night, and let's just say we had a good time celebrating the pregame for St. Patrick's Day. But let me just tell you something. For 18 years, he has led AUSA in such an incredible way. It's their strongest organization supporting our Army. And we had an incredible leader, 6 decades of service. Besides being the Chief of Staff of the Army, he actually was my predecessor as Acting Secretary of the Army. Probably the only person that I know of, and we talked about this, that actually was Chief of Staff and also Acting Secretary of the Army. So truly an historical figure. But sir, you've been a mentor of mine. I will never forget it. When I was nominated, I sat right down with you right away, and you've always been with me every step of the way to guide me, and I will never forget that, so thank you very much. I know we have some other great leaders. We have Trade-Out Commander Dave Perkins who's here, and we were walking in together and sharing ideas. General Vi, and I'm going to talk about you in a second, General Vi, but him and his wife Linda are awesome and just great Americans here at AMC. But there's also some other folks. I know we have Joe Fitzgerald, who used to be the president of the AUSA Huntsville chapter, which was chapter of the year many years. His successor, John, so make sure I get it right. Yep, John Wright. John, I didn't see it this morning, so they're making me work for my breakfast this morning. So, in fact, I had a bad joke earlier. I was like, if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. John Wright, that's it. But let me just say just a couple of things right from the get-go. It is truly an honor to be here and to serve as Acting Secretary of the Army. As General Sullivan mentioned, I'm a third-generation soldier. I know you joked about Vietnam. I'm actually named after a Vietnam veteran. His name was Patrick Ward, who was a gunner on a Huey who was killed and earned a Silver Star. He was my mom's best friend growing up. And my brother does search and rescue for the Air Force. He's done 2 deployments. I've done 2 deployments. And then, obviously, as General Sullivan mentioned, I had the great opportunity to serve in the Congress, really, which, as you know, is like the nation's board of directors, which isn't getting a lot done these past few years. But I had the great privilege to serve on the Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and also the Appropriations Committee. And that's the one thing I wanted to mention right off the get-go. I left Congress 5 years ago. When I left Congress after serving as an appropriator, the Army budget was at $243 billion a year. And I testified in front of the House Armed Services Committee yesterday asking for a base budget of $125.1 billion. so over 40% cut. And I understand we have a lot of fiscal constraints on our country, but when you look at our Army is asked to do missions for our nation time and time and time again. So, and whether it's Department of Defense, who asked us to do 41 out of the 70 executive agents, you know, whether it's the Post Office, detainee operations, IED research, or whether it's when Ebola happens and the President says, send in the 101st Airborne Division. Whether it's, as you know, what's going on now with the Russian aggression, ISIS, North Korea. The world is a volatile place. And our nation continues to ask our military, especially our Army, to step up to the plate. Sometimes it's hard to put it in perspective when you're living it every day, but we are right now in the longest war in American history. Over 15 years. 96% of the casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan are from the Army and the Marine Corps, our land forces. When you look at that, and we've had 2.6 million troops who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's less than 1% of America. We have 330 million Americans. So we need to do everything we possibly can to make sure we can maintain an all-volunteer force. And it's tougher and tougher. When you look at it right now, less than 1 in 4, it's about 1 in 4 Americans can even come to the military because they have to be physically fit. They have to be mentally strong. And they have to have character. And so one of the things that I want to talk to you real quick about my partnership with General Mark Milley, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and what we're trying to do, and with the other leaders, is to make sure that we are crystal clear to the Congress, we are crystal clear to you, we are crystal clear to everybody. That readiness is our #1 priority, and there is no other #1. And we have to figure out ways to do everything possible to maintain that readiness, to grow that readiness. Individual readiness, unit readiness. And part of that is when you look at the numbers, is funding. So as these budgets shrink over 40% for the Army, what are we doing to gain the efficiencies and drive innovation to save dollars that we can put into readiness, to put in the training? Because as you know, when you look at it historically, we can't keep fighting the last fight. We are proficient when it comes to counterinsurgency, counterterrorism. We've been doing it for 15 years. We have to prepare for the next fight, which is high-end ground combat. And we have to be thinking about those leaders, those sergeants majors, those brigade commanders who haven't been used to going through CTC, Combat Training Center rotations, prepping for that high-end ground combat. Because let's be straight. I said this to Congress yesterday. You know, wars with great powers, those days, for some, they think they're over. They're not over. They might happen through surrogate actors. Well, we see what Russia's doing. But we have to prepare. And we have to be ready to fight tonight. So when I talk about some of my priorities, it's under the guise of we have to make sure that we are focused on readiness. So things like that connection between the 1 million soldiers we have right now in our Army and when they leave that Army, that connective tissue, to encourage them to join organizations like AUSA or other organizations. The lawyers, I might get in trouble when I say that, but you know, That connective tissue is important. You have 22 million Americans who are veterans. The majority of them are Army veterans. And when they leave the Army, that handoff isn't exactly as smooth as it should be. Now, when I left, after my second deployment, I came back to the 2nd Airborne Division. I left eventually for Brighton, North Carolina. I got my DD-14, my honorable discharge. I drove back home to Pennsylvania. We didn't have the Soldier for Life program. We didn't have the TAP program. And I will give General O a lot of credit. That was his initiative, that Soldier for Life program. We knew to expand the Soldier for Life program. Do you know how much the Department of Defense had to pay the last 5 years in unemployment? Anybody know? $4.6 billion in the last 5 years. The Department of Defense, including the Army, comes out of our budget, had to pay for unemployment. So this initiative to expand Soldier for Life, to make sure that we have the handoff, starts from the time they join the military, not just till when they leave, but they're expected to be a soldier for life always. And General Gordon Sullivan, you are the epitome of your 6 days of service, of a soldier for life. You have been there every step of the way. And we're lucky because I know Carter Ham, General Ham, has also been an incredible advocate. He's your successor. We're excited to be. I worked with him a lot. He's obviously chairman of the National Commission on the Future of the Army, 1st Infantry Division commander, just a great American. I'm excited. I worked with him in my prior role, and I look forward to work with him just like I'll continue to work with you, sir. But that Soldier for Life program, and again, I want to make sure that I'm clear, is that we need to connect our military. When you leave the military, whether it's after 3 years or 30 years, you are expected, when you become a soldier, an American soldier, that you are a leader of character for a lifetime of service. When I taught at West Point 16 years ago, that's the mission statement of West Point. They don't just develop second lieutenants. They don't just train you. They don't just educate you, give you a degree. They develop. It's the premier leadership institution in the world. And I'm not a graduate, just taught there, but you look at that, and that's what every soldier should be. A soldier for life. And I will tell you that I get pretty ticked off when I see in the media time and time and time again that our veterans are treated like they're charity cases. Because let me tell you something. They're not. They are civic assets. They are treasures to our country. Veterans, on average, make $10,000 more than their civilian counterparts. Veterans are more likely to be employed. Veterans are more likely to vote in elections. They're more likely to coach Little League. They are civic assets and leaders in our community when they leave our Army. They leave our Army better, and they want to continue to serve. And we need to ask them to serve, to continue to serve. And that connective tissue to Soldier for Life is what's desperately needed right now. We need them to be our ambassadors. We need them to go in to our career centers, our recruitment centers, to go talk about what it was like. I mean, let's face it. I was a guy who, my dad was enlisted. My two uncles served in Vietnam. My mother was a Catholic nun. She was disappointed I became a congressman and I'm not a priest, so I can, whatever I do, now I'm acting secretary, I'll never be able to. I was the 1987 Altar Boy of the Year, and it's been downhill ever since, according to her. But I will tell you, when I joined the Army at 19, little did I know 8 years later I would be a West Point professor at age 27. Little did I know that 6 years after that, I'd be the youngest U.S. congressman to serve in Congress. If it wasn't for the Army and things like PTG, post-traumatic growth, not post-traumatic stress, or post-traumatic growth, We are putting incredible responsibility on these young Americans, and they are answering the call time and time again. There is no doubt that all of us are incredibly inspired when you see what they're doing. And I'm also incredibly inspired when you see history right in front of us. I mean, those 3 women that just graduated Ranger School, pretty awesome. I mean, I got that chance to talk to them. I mean, one, you know, she's mother of 2. We were talking about CrossFit. I mean, I was working out this morning doing like a mini CrossFit workout, and which I think we made some divots in the grass at Embassy Suite. So if we know the groundskeeper, if I owe him a couple bucks, I apologize about that. Look, I was golfing. I wasn't. We were throwing rocks. But that's what CrossFit is. You do crazy stuff. But when you look at right now the history of what's going on, I mean, our Army time and time again is just inspiring the nation and is leading the way. So let me talk about General V real quick, and I have some notes I want to refer to because I'm really, really proud of him. And Dennis and his wife Linda are pretty terrific. I'm very much in a competition, and when you look at the Army itself, when you look at the business operations, you know, our Army, we're not a public company, and we don't treat it like a public company, but we are, if we were in the Fortune 500, we would be a Fortune 10 company. Fortune 10 in revenue, we'd be actually Fortune 2 if you look at our personnel, because we have, as you know, 1.4 million folks, 1 million soldiers, and 400 great civilians. So when you look at General V, when you look at AMC, and I will tell you, I love, well, him and, I don't want to just say, General Vi and Command Sergeant Major Sims do an incredible job, but, you know, they say, and I love this, if a soldier drives it, flies it, shoots it, wears it, communicates with it, or eats it, AMC produces it and provides it. And I love that. But let me tell you something. They're underselling themselves. Because more than any other command, AMC is the business side of our military. You know, I testify in Congress time and time again, General Milley and I, and you all know it, because you're part of the solution. We don't want a fair fight for our soldiers. We want to make sure they have the tactical and technical advantage over our enemies. And these public-private partnerships that you bring to the table are incredibly important. What you do, this partnership that we have, that AMC really helps us manage, is incredible. So I told you I love about competition. So you look at AMC operates our global supply chain across 50 states and 145 countries worldwide. So you all see the commercials about UPS, you know, what can Brown do for you? They do it fast. You know, they're in more countries. But you know what? They have 6 times as many employees as AMC. Dennis is his team. I look at that, I think we're edging them out pretty well. They also manage, though, about 175,000 contracting actions, valued at $55 billion. That amount in size would be the 105th largest country in the world as far as GDP. And it's amount greater than 125 other countries. And that's just AMC. And obviously, what you do to manage foreign military sales, $6 billion this fiscal year, which is critically important for industrial base. And they do it with 65,000 members in their organization, soldiers, civilians, and do a great job every single day. But what they do is they deliver readiness throughout the world. What they do is to make sure that our soldiers do not have a fair fight. They make sure that our soldiers have what they need to win and keep our families safe here and home. Let me talk a little bit about readiness because I think it's important. And I highlighted some of this yesterday in my testimony to Congress. We must produce ready units to deter and defeat our nation's enemies, to defend our homeland, to project power, to respond to crises, to build global security, and always to win decisively. And by ready, we mean units that are fully manned, trained in their combat task, fully equipped according to their desired structure, and led by competent leaders. So when we say this is our focus, this is our vision statement, this is our mission to increase readiness, to build it, this is why. First, readiness wins wars. Our Army is not the largest in the world right now. It's factually never been the largest Army in the world. And at times, we haven't even been the best equipped. But let me tell you something. Since World War II, we have recognized that ready soldiers, properly manned, trained, equipped, and led, can beat larger or even more determined forces. So whether we're confronting the barbaric acts of ISIS or the desperation of North Korea, our Army must always be prepared to execute and to win. We train like we fight, and we must always be ready to fight tonight. Next, readiness deters our most dangerous threats. I'd rather be proactive than reactive. We are reminded with alarming frequency that great power conflicts are not dead. As I mentioned earlier, they manifest themselves today on a regional basis. Both Russia and China are challenging America's willingness and ability to enforce international standards of conduct. But a ready Army provides America the strength to deter such actions. Readiness also makes future training less costly. Continuous operations since 2001 have left our force proficient in stability and counterterrorism operations. But our future command, as I mentioned earlier, our future command sergeant majors and brigade commanders need to ensure that they have those critical combat training center experiences. Finally, readiness prepares our force for transformation. Our Army must be prepared and willing to face the high-end and advanced combat power of Russia, or more likely Russian capability employed by surrogate actors. We are dedicating resources to develop solutions for this and future possibilities, to allow our force the space to develop new concepts or those suggested by the National Commission on the Future of the Army. Our formations must first be ready to execute against these current and emerging threats. And while readiness will remain the top priority of our Army as a whole, there are also several areas that we need to improve on. I look at that, as I mentioned earlier, through the lens of the Soldier for Life program and the connective tissue that we need to do. We need to ask many of our soldiers and many of our brothers and sisters in the other services to do our part to recruit the next generation of Americans to come in. But I would also say we need to do a better job when it comes to public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships are incredibly important. You know, when I mentioned $243 billion when I left Congress 5 years ago, the 11 budget, to the $125.1 billion request I made yesterday, we understand the fiscal constraints. And thank goodness we don't have sequestration. We have the BBA of 15, which at least gives us 2 years of adequate, minimal, but adequate and predictable funding. But we need to make sure that when we have stronger public-private relationships, that we can build on that we can build on that synergy. And when you look at the dollars that come in, it's almost about $1 a day that an American pays for its Army, about $7.50 a week. But these public-private partnerships truly have a practical value to readiness as well. Because every dollar we can save in one area can be recommitted to spending in other areas. So by reducing overhead costs, we can better fund those who are on the front lines. Better business practices are better business practices as well. I mean, many of you know, I'm the acting Secretary of the Army. I was confirmed by the Senate in December to be the Undersecretary of the Army, which is the CMO, the Chief Management Officer. So we need to do everything we can to create these efficiencies. We need to look strategically at our tooth-to-tail ratio, because we fight today as a joint force, and we have significant responsibilities when we talk about that combined fight.